Synchronicity. Sometimes the stars are aligning and the tumblers fall in place. We witness a bit of magic that puts a smile on our face. A little bit of alignment when everything is clear, and we glimpse the possibilities of a future that is near. We so long for these moments when everything makes sense, and something pushes us forward when we might be on the fence. It's these little bits of clarity that makes life seem worthwhile, reminding us we are all connected, and again, it makes us smile. By Robert Lonely. Wow, that was actually quite optimistic. I like that.
That was good. I believe it's iambic pentameter, but I could be wrong about that. So
iambic pentameter, so it says invisible voice in the background. So, but before I talk about the invisible voice in the background, who is this person sitting, I suppose, in front of you?
What is
this? Or what is this? Exactly. Okay. So I'm Shen, Rocket Man here. So with another episode, SG2 on Space, episode 214. We took a few weeks hiatus due to some personal things going on with me and work. And then last week I was out of town. So we're back at it today at a irregularly scheduled time if you're watching this live. But if not, if you're not watching this live, then it really doesn't matter, right? The show is here. So podcast here for the last few years now, talking about different, space topics every week. So this week is going to be talking about Carl Jung and synchronicity, which is slightly different because we normally talk about astronomers if we're going to talk about anybody, or scientists or engineers or whatnot. But now we're talking about a psychologist. And I have the book in front of me, although admittedly I haven't read the whole thing. But you know who has?
Who? Oh, I have. I have, yes.
You have. Leonard.
Yes.
Oh, yes. So my co-host, Leonard Kramer, who actually tends to read books and then be able to talk about it.
And then, and it's like weird things that I read about, like random things. Here, let me fix my camera here. I'm not comfortable with the way that.
Oh, yeah. Before we continue, I do have to say thank you to our supporters and patrons, Kyle Baker, Sam Welsh, John Graves, and Atum Ra, the last of which was not donating financially, but definitely helped with the production of the show for over a year. So prior to doing this,
Lord Ra,
indeed. All right, Leonard. So you have read this book. Okay.
Yeah.
I think everything here is backwards. If you see it on the camera, I don't know. I can't tell. So Carl Jung, as a quick background, Carl Jung, who is he? I mean, I'm sure everyone's heard of him. Jung.
I'm not sure everyone's heard of him. I mean, Carl Jung was he was a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist, and he founded a discipline called analytical psychology. He was known for concepts like something called collective unconscious, if you can believe that. Sometimes you'll hear this word archetypes, and the word introvert and extrovert were invented by him. And also, that is true, yeah. And also psychological complexes. So he was a lot of concepts like that. He was associated with Sigmund Freud in the early 20th century. I think he was born in 1875, and he lived until 1961. If you go on YouTube, you can find some very old television interviews of him, and in fact, I searched him out because I was reading some of what he was writing about this concept of synchronicity, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and I'm thinking, well, he doesn't sound completely healthy to me, So I sought out some the YouTube videos, the television interviews that he did in the late 50s, and he interviews. He seemed perfectly healthy, so he didn't sound crazy at all.
You're saying from the book, it doesn't seem like he's that.
So he described some things in the book which kind of troubled me, as though it sounded almost like maybe symptoms of schizophrenia or hallucinations. He had an interesting life. I think he described his parents as he didn't have a bad relationship with his parents, particularly his father was sort of stern. His mother was intelligent, but they were both sort of backward in their thinking. And he used the word medieval to describe them.
In what sense?
Well, he comes from a line of ministers, Protestant ministers in Switzerland. His native language was German, but he was not German. He was Swiss.
Right. Swiss,
So
they speak German. Some parts of it.
In that part, Switzerland has 3 languages, I think: German, French, and there's a little bit of Italian, I think. And there's also some strange languages there also, but never mind. We're getting off task here. So he had some mystical experiences in childhood, like some strange visions and dreams that he related to. And so he was very open to this idea of paranormal experience. He was also very smart, very bright kid, and he ended up going to medical school. He picked medical school, and psychiatry was what he started work. His work in. He became associated with Sigmund Freud in the early 1900s, and they later became estranged. So one of the things that he relates in his book,
he and Sigmund Freud became estranged.
They did, yeah. But Freud. My take on Freud was that, and I've read some books by Freud also. My take on him was that he was very dogmatic about his theory. He was not open at all. It was his way or the highway. And he thought that Jung was a prodigy and would continue on with the psychoanalytic method that Freud came to. But Jung seemed to be more open to things, and he thought, first of all, I don't know if the idea about Freud, which is now sort of discredited. We got to give Freud the credit for sort of discovering this idea of unconsciousness, of things in the unconscious, and they believed that dreams were sort of a window into the unconscious.
So just to level set here, before Freud and Carl Jung came along, there was no scientific study of the unconscious or subconscious.
I think that's right. I think that's true. I think that Freud was a very acute observer of nature, of human nature, and they were and of course in the 19th century, 18th, 19th century, people presented with depression and schizophrenia and anxiety disorders, all these kind of things that we recognize today, and they were working hard on trying to figure out what to do. And actually, as in the medical field, it's very, in that epoch, it was very frustrating because they really had nothing for them other than to talk to them, talk to people with, imagine having schizophrenia. And there was really nothing that could be done for them to help. You're okay. That's good. Yeah, yeah, right. And so they had a close relationship at first, but then they kind of parted ways based on the notion about the unconscious, because Freud had this idea that everything was sexual frustration, and he probably had a lot of patients who that was actually a thing. For them because of the Victorian era, particularly women, who were repressed sexually and that sort of thing. But Jung came from a different cultural milieu, and so he had patients. He said, he had patients that, like, I have patients who are bankers, and they're just interested in money, or things like that. So he didn't see what Freud saw at all. So they kind of like cracked apart on that. Also, Freud was totally naturalistic. He was what do you call somebody? Materialist. Freud was very material, meaning the only world was science and the scientific
Right.
explanations,
So,
rationally.
I'm gonna guess
Um,
Freud did not have these mystical experiences that Carl Jung had as
no,
a child.
no, he didn't, and they parted ways. So, and
Right.
in that era, people did it was very popular for people to go to things like seances and try to talk to the dead and their
Oh,
dead relatives,
I mean,
that kind of stuff.
like still happens today. Just the other day.
Yeah, but
I'm kidding. I mean,
but in that era, it does happen today. But in
it does.
that era, I mean, people thought that there was like something to it, and I'll get into that some more. And Freud, Jung was influenced by that. He was open to the possibility that that kind of stuff was actually real. And there was a notable incident that Jung wrote about in 1909, and so he and Freud were in a long discussion, and they started talking about their differing beliefs. And Jung said, suddenly, like in the other room, there was this loud crack and like a loud noise, almost like a gunshot or something. And Jung, he said, and they both looked at each other. I guess. I mean, I guess they kind of like
That's what would happen. I imagine if I'm in the same room as you and we heard something,
right.
we're looking at each other.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
so Freud was pretty unsettled by it, and then Jung told him, "I feel like it's going to happen again." Right. And so, like, less than a few seconds later, they heard another crack. Okay. The identical kind of crack. And so they go into the next room, and it was a piece of furniture, I think a desk or something, that had sort of spontaneously split in two and made this sound. Now, personally, I think I believe that account. But I mean, I could account for it as just a very old piece of furniture that had developed stresses in it and dried out and suddenly spontaneously cracked. So you'd call that a coincidence that it happened. But it's strange that Jung had some kind of feeling, or he related some kind of feeling that he had that before it happened, and
Right.
and I think it freaked Freud out. But that was very close to the end of their relationship, and so they kind of separated based upon that. So in the book that we're talking about, Synchronicity, so he talked about that, and
Here's the book.
yeah, and also some of this comes from some excerpts of Jung's autobiography that I also read. But
It's great to have that background knowledge. Yes.
Yeah. So he, so in the book, Jung talks about, he has several sections where he talks about astrology, right? And ESP, extrasensory perception. So what, which means,
okay. ESP is like, for instance, you can tell me what I'm actually reading.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Right. So
yeah.
So in that era, and actually the book Synchronicity, I think was written in I think it was written in 1960, shortly before. I should know that. I don't even know. I thought the book was written in 1960, not long before. Not only a few years before, or even a year before Carl Jung died. But he talked about astrology, and astrology he attributed to what they call archetypal patterns, cultural patterns. And so a lot of the things that we see in the zodiac are a compendium of what he calls psychic realities. And these are archetypes.
So he believed that these archetypes are actually related to your astrological signs?
Well, he was interested in it. He was interested in it to determine whether it actually had some predictive power, and he got some statistics from astrology people having to do with marriage and astrological signs. I I went over that over and over again, and I couldn't make any real clear sense about what he was saying, but he did kind of conclude that it didn't have any rational basis. Okay, but he was interested in the symbols and the patterns of meaning that are in it. Okay.
Yeah, it is interesting. He went into all these statistical analyses.
Right, and it seems very tedious to me. So he tried to relate to like radiation from the sun and that kind of just very arm wavy kinds of things that he talked about. So it was not that I wasn't much impressed with that per se. Okay, the other thing that happened. The other thing he was talking about was there was research in the 1920s all the way up into the 50s, and people are probably familiar with this. A researcher named Joseph Rhine, okay, who pioneered the use of these are called. He used these things called Zener cards. So there was
okay.
Yeah.
Go on, keep talking.
I think there was a circle, a wavy line, a triangle, and a star, and something else, like 5 different cards. And so he repeatedly worked with graduate students and volunteers.
Right? ESP research.
ESP research. And in the 1920s, he was writing papers and reporting some statistically significant positive results of extrasensory perception using those Zener cards. I think that
the Zener cards, by the way, on the screen there. Okay, go on, Leonard.
Yeah. So, but I think that from the 1960s and 70s on, it's been completely discredited. It's not really reproducible when you account for cheating, bias, leakage of information, and so forth. But Jung thought there was something to it, right? Because the papers were peer-reviewed papers that were published. I don't think he knew Rhine in particular. Rhine worked at Duke University. Okay, he's American. So he thought there was something to that, and that led him to and then backing up a little bit in the 1930s, one of our favorite physicists, Wolfgang Pauli, who kind of inferred the existence of the neutrino.
Wolfgang Pauli related to Zener cards? I'm confused.
No. Okay, let's move to a different but related topic.
Okay,
it's a different but related topic. Okay. Wolfgang Pauli.
Talk about Pauli.
Pauli was a physicist in the 1920s and 30s, and of course, he came up with an exclusion principle for fermions. Like the spin exclusion, especially for electrons, which was very important, and also he inferred the presence of neutrinos, even though neutrinos were not observable. There was a deficit or a defect in the amount of energy for electron proton interactions. A neutron decaying into a proton releases some energy, and some of the energy was missing in the components. And so he says, dear radioactive people, I think he was kind of like a nerdy kind of guy. But he had some distress, some personal problems in the 30s, and his father, Pauli's father, referred him or suggested that he seek out Carl Jung's clinic, and I think they originally passed him on to like an intern who worked with him, but eventually he made his way up to working with Jung, and I think he kind of resolved his problem. He had a lot of problems like with his marriage and personal issues like that, which are, maybe we don't even really want to talk to. But what it led to him to was to talk to Jung about physics, because Jung was interested in in making elements of the psyche that he talked about in his work, the psychological things, whether it was really part of the physical world.
What do you mean by whether psychological things are really part of the physical world?
So yeah, what does that mean? Okay, so that's why I was so interested in talking about this. In the old days, and actually the way I was taught quantum mechanics, it's like, oh God, we're going to talk about quantum mechanics again. Okay,
it's one of our favorite topics.
Definitely it's one of our favorite topics.
Yep.
So one of the interpretations, which I think is discredited now. I don't think this is accepted, but the idea of the Copenhagen interpretation was this notion of observation, so that when you make an observation, you change the state of nature, right? So
I think that's how I was taught too. But
yeah.
Okay, go on.
Sorry I think we have an alternate view now having to do with the phase of the wave function, so that anything that disturbs the phase or randomizes the phase of the wave function should be called an observation. The problem is with the word observation, because it suggests that it's connected to consciousness. And Pauli and some of the others in the 1920s, they seriously considered that was the case, that you needed a conscious observer. Yeah.
With a brain.
With a brain.
Like to do something. Somehow we are influencing reality.
We're influencing. And so Carl, Jung had patients that would talk to him about these like synchronous things. Like one of the famous examples was a woman who was like, I guess she was sort of nerdy, and she had like an analytical view of everything. Everything's analytical. I don't quite know what, and he couldn't get through to her, and he was like her third physician, third psychiatrist talking to her. I don't know what her complaint was exactly, but he said that's how he described her. He says she was so analytical that you couldn't get through to her. And so she was so in those days, and I think this was before I think this is like in the around 1918, 1919 timeframe. And so he was talking to her, and he said they asked him about their dreams, right? And in those days, that actually was kind of useful because they didn't have any other, so it ended up, apparently it was useful to talk to them about their dreams. If you go to a psychiatrist today, I understand, they don't try to tell them their dreams. They go, I don't care about what you're dreaming. It's like, but
I see a therapist every day. Not every day. Wow, that'd be a lot. Every week. Okay, guys, I do not see a therapist every day.
And
every week.
Yeah.
I haven't talked about dreams yet. I don't even think that's not brought up. I guess
they don't seem to be interested in dreams anymore. But in that days, so she was telling him about a dream that she had where somebody had given her a golden scarab beetle, like an Egyptian scarab beetle, and it was very meaningful to her in the dream. And so during the conversation, she's sitting across from him. The window, he hears something tap against the window, and he turns around, and there was a scarab beetle, a real live scarab beetle, probably like a dung beetle from cattle or something. And he opened the window, and he caught the beetle, and he handed it to her. And he said, "Are you looking it up to find out whether I'm telling you the?"
No, you're telling me the truth. What page number is it on? I actually read that story. I was pretty astounded.
Yeah.
All right, please
yeah. It's a famous story. So he hands her. He says, "Here's your scarab beetle," and evidently it was a breakthrough. It's like she was so stunned by that because she had dreamt this thing, and then he produced the beetle for her that had come to the door or come to the window, and he also related something about like, so that's a very famous example that he talks about. And then later in the 40s, he also related this case where he was doing some research with archetypes, cultural archetypes having to do with fish, some kind of fish emblem or fish motif, right? And then he remarks that, you know, it was Friday, and so in the hospital they had a tradition of serving fish on Friday, right? And then someone came and one of his patients came, an old patient that he hadn't seen in a long time, came to visit with him, and she had pictures of fish that she had drawn, and then somebody else had a skirt or a dress with fish and seahorses and stuff like that on it. And so fish was getting repeated several times over several days, and it was very significant to him, and stimulated this idea of synchronicity. And so he just
won. Idea of synchronicity.
What
is it? Everything?
Well,
coincidences.
Synchronicity is what you and I call coincidences, but they are acausal. He said acausal, meaning not having a cause related to each other. And you can go on the internet and you can find all kinds of people talking about their asynchronous kinds of things. I think you've even talked to me about asynchronous, synchronous, acausal synchronous things, like having to do with, right? And so he thought that it was psychologically significant, and it probably is psychologically significant, but it's not. I don't think it's physically significant. But he was.
All right, so go ahead.
I was going to say, so in those days, if you know about Einstein, Carl Jung did know Einstein, at least in the early 1900s. He met with him and talked to him about
Carl Jung, a lot of physicists. For sure.
Yeah, he was interested in that, and he was a scientist in a certain sense, but maybe not quite as well trained mathematically. So Einstein had kind of an important effect on Jung's thinking about relativity and space and time, but Pauli especially. But if you remember, Einstein had a paper in 1935. We call it today the EPR paper.
And then. What is it?
Einstein, Podolsky, Rosen.
EPR paradox, right?
Right. So where you can have entangled. They didn't use the word entangled, but we've talked about entangled events where you make a measurement, or you collapse the wave function of one entangled element of the entangled system, and then the other one becomes known remotely and instantaneously, and resembles an acausal event. So that actually is a physically realizable synchronicity type of event, but it only occurs, at the atomic or molecular level. You could postulate, now we're getting way speculative and way out there on a limb, where we could say perhaps when you're just speculating, perhaps one of the examples that Jung had was that a person gets on the streetcar, right? And he gets the ticket for the streetcar, and the ticket is number 302, right? And then they go to the theater, right? And they buy their ticket to the theater, and
it's also 302.
302, right? And then you get home and you get a phone call or a reference on the phone to a telephone number with 302 in it, right?
Yeah.
So these are all acausal synchronous events. And so it's similar. It's in the similar characteristic of the acausal events that are associated with not acausal, but actually causal correlations having to do with EPR entanglement. So that's why I was interested in it. I don't believe it. I believe
Huh.
Jung that these are psychologically important events, but I don't actually believe that there's anything
There's
to
actual
the
physical, like
yeah.
our mind is not literally changing the world so as to create these
I don't think
reality.
so. I don't. I mean, I'm open to it, or else I wouldn't be talking about this, and I'd be saying,
Right. Okay, so
it's,
like that previous example you were giving, like the 302, like I guess some people who are probably not like okay, they would think like maybe my brain is somehow changing the reality around me, where that increases the probability of these things happening around.
so
Like people think like the thought, what is it like? If you think about something hard enough, that becomes reality, right?
right, yeah,
If you take that to the next level, then it'd be like all these coincidences that happen in your life,
exactly,
they're really because you're thinking that, and so you're manifesting
exactly,
just by your thought. Okay.
right.
And according to
So
Carl Jung, well, like it's like
he,
psychologically sure, but no, like your brain's
yeah.
actually not affecting reality.
So what I like about it is his openness
Right.
to that possibility. I like the fact that Wolfgang Pauli, who was a very imaginative person, extremely productive, because he predicted neutrinos 30 years before they were ever observed, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, the paper
so
with so this paper that you're probably describing with Wolfgang Pauli is this one, right? Interpretation of Nature and the Psyche.
yeah, yes, I think so. Right.
So yeah, so
So that's good.
you can actually find this online.
I
Uh,
didn't know that. I haven't read the paper, but I'd heard about this paper.
So and this is like
So
I don't know, it just goes on and on and on. You
yeah,
can like
I
200
I
pages.
I guess all right. So I guess the thing is that I know this is a pretty unusual kind of topic for the
Is it now?
channel,
It's interesting.
but I thought it was interesting.
Like once, so this guy, like, wait, is this example? So mainly through the when you said J.B. Ryan, his fellow coworkers, who
Uh-huh.
one's guessed all 25 cards correctly, which gives a probability of 1 to thousand, million, billion,
Yeah.
trillion. Wow, 1 to that. This possibility of a pack being shuffled in some arbitrary ways guarded against by
Yes.
apparatus, blah blah blah. So it's
Okay.
like,
So I want to say that is actually impossible, virtually impossible, and so it's more likely that it's the result of cheating. you you know it's more likely that there's something else wrong with it. I mean, that's what I would look at there. But they thought that Ryan's work was dispositive. They thought but it has since, I believe, it has since been discredited.
well, I mean,
So
all I need to do is get some of these Zener cards, right, and do some
no,
testing myself.
it's actually, well, that's all you need to do, but it's actually more complicated than that, because you have to. It's a statistical result, and then it's a rather weak statistical result, and it's only some people who are able to do this, and so you have to. He
Right,
ended up
which
doing. Yeah, he ended up working on this for months and months and months, or years even, with
well,
thousands of.
right here, right, like
Right.
so,
So
uh,
the signal appeared to be statistically significant, but rather weak. So it's not so easy to actually show it, and I think it has since been discredited when. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just I'm open to that, but another thing that I observe is that
interesting.
if there really was such a thing as extrasensory perception, evolution would have exploited it. In other words, we would already know about it. Like, we'd be able to find our brains
But
are,
extrasensory perception, like if that is limited to only a few people, though, or a few.
well, I mean, yeah, but then they, so still, I mean, well, you're right. I mean, maybe it doesn't get inherited, or
Right, exactly.
but if it was an inherited thing, so
I
anyway,
mean,
I don't.
I just saying, I believe that we have different people have different, like we have way more than the 5 senses. That's my view. I just think we don't just tap into it. So
Okay.
but yeah, you're like, okay. I'm not saying you can like, get all
So
these, like, be able to observe these cards.
yeah,
But,
right.
you
Well,
know,
Jung did mention about Chinese people from China and Asia that
the
when you talk to some, I think he particularly mentioned
the
someone from
Tao,
China
the Jing actually in there. He quoted
that he,
Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, actually, which is interesting.
uh-huh,
I was like, so I mean, it like
yeah.
sorry, were you gonna say something?
No,
He
I was
literally
waiting for you to say something.
So, Zhuangzi, a contemporary of Plato, says of the psychological premises on which Tao is based, the state in
The
which
Tao.
ego and no, or Tao, non-ego, are no longer opposed, is called the pivot Tao. It sounds almost like a criticism of our scientific view of the world when he remarks that Tao is obscured when you fix your eye on little segments of existence only, or limitations are not originally grounded in the meanings of life. Originally, words had no fixed meanings. Differences only arose through looking at things subjectively. The sages of old, says Zhuangzi, took as their starting point a state when the existence of things had not yet begun. This is indeed the extreme limit beyond which you cannot go. Blah blah blah. Okay, it keeps going.
Yeah, blah blah blah. Yeah.
Okay, but I don't know. I mean, like, this is pretty philosophical.
Yeah.
He's quoting more than one Chinese philosopher here.
So one of the amazing things about Jung was he seemed to know Greek and Latin and Sanskrit and a lot of languages, and he was extremely well read as far as different cultures. He had gone all around the world talking to different cultures about the elements of their what this theory about archetypes. And I actually think there is something to it. He did think that there was something called collective unconscious, which is like
go ahead.
and it always seemed kind of woo woo, kind of but I wasn't sure exactly, and I think he wasn't sure himself. I think he wasn't sure whether it was like we have a collective archetypes or collective unconscious, which has to do with our innate consciousness that we share with everyone else. But it's I guess most people know that archetypes are part of literature and right. Some of the Joseph Campbell, okay, who was
Wise Old Man Shadow, Tower of Water, and the Tree.
Yeah. So Joseph Campbell, who was American academic, wrote about these not archetypes, but he observed this thing called hero's journey and commonalities in literature throughout the world, and
which the same kind of themes over and over again.
It seems right, King Arthur and David and Goliath and different kinds of themes like that, where a person
all the hero epics of ancient cultures. They all follow,
right.
Like, many of them follow the hero's journey.
The hero's journey, where one person is picked and somehow he's selected, and he has to go through some ordeal to learn and meet whoever he needs to learn what he needs to do this great thing, and then he returns to his origin, a kind of a different person.
Exactly.
And
repeat it over and over again.
Right. So, and that's actually that's actually been exploited deliberately by certain authors, like I don't know, George Lucas, who wrote the story about Star Wars, which is just a model, a perfect model of the hero's journey.
Archetypes are universal organizing themes for patterns that appear regardless of space, time, or person, appearing in all existential realms and all levels of systematic recursion. They're organized as themes in the unus mundus, which Jung described as
the one world.
as a potential
Yeah.
world outside of time and are detectable through synchronicities. That's interesting.
I think that's the theory. Anyway, that sounds pretty speculative and far out, but I like it. I like it.
Sounds speculative and far out, but I like it.
Yeah, I like it. Yes. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say about that covers about everything. I have some notes here. Let me just check. Go to the fish incident. I talked about the scarab beetle, synchronicity, Wolfgang Pauli. Yeah, that's relationship with mystical experiences. Yeah.
You're like, we're done. Like, look, guys. But
Yeah.
hey, actually, you know what? You for the viewers out there, you should read the book. I mean,
yeah. Go ahead and read the book. It is kind of a difficult slog, especially that part about the astrology. Yeah. And it just seemed very tedious to me, and I almost said worthless, but but it's not worthless.
You know, maybe you're coming from the perspective where you're already assuming like there's astrology is not to be taken.
Well, that's true. I do take that. That is my position. So
if you were taking that position already, you wouldn't be spending time like, hey, maybe there is actually something to astrology.
I'm open to that, but I mean, even Jung didn't really come to that conclusion. He said that they were meaningful. Okay. That they were meaningful archetypes, but that it was not dispositively, there wasn't scientific basis for it.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, well,
he was looking for that. He still thought about that the work by Rhine, the Zener card stuff was real, but I think that has since also been discredited. So
I might get some of those Zener cards and start doing some tests.
Absolutely. Yes. Do some tests. You can do it. You can go around. What?
Get those Zener cards. But you're already you're like a skeptic already. Doesn't it?
I'm not. I really am not. I really am open to it. It's that, but I'm not open all the time. It's like, what was it? Somebody said, I have an open mind, but it's not so open that my brains have fallen out. So
I like that quote. If you quote that.
I don't know who said that, but I do come to conclusions, some objective conclusions about things, and so. But I'm absolutely open to Platonic ideas and religious concepts and all that. I don't. You're not going to see me saying.
I am going to buy some Zener cards and test it out.
I'm sure you can get them on Amazon, probably all different kinds of designs.
Oh, by the way, for people interested, if you want to get this book, you can find it on Amazon.
Absolutely. I don't think it's very expensive.
You can go to Barnes and Nobles. Really, any bookstore that has anything related to psychology will have this book. I would think.
Amazon or let me see. I get the Kindle version of it, mostly.
Yeah. I mean, it's been around for like.
You can also. I think that there's some. I think there are some audio versions of it also available, narrated.
And if any of you want to try out Zener cards, you can also find them on Amazon or probably some other places, and you can test out yourself and your friends. See if you have ESP without realizing it, or not.
So there's five different, and so I guess the idea is you have a partner that holds up the card and doesn't show you what it says, and then you say, see if you can tell me what it is, right? And so you guess, and then you write it down, right? And then
25 times.
Yeah, and then you should succeed on average. If there's no ESP present, then you should guess 20% of the time, because there's 5 cards. So if you just guess randomly, you should come out.
Yeah. So I mean, but so like I mean, they haven't shown it to be true. That 250 Zener cards almost only predict 50 of them according to this You're supposed
When
to
I was, yeah, when I was in middle school or maybe junior high,
yeah.
this was a very popular kind of thing for people to do science fair projects or science projects. A lot of kids would do that. I didn't. I always said, this is bullshit. I mean,
Okay. I mean, I figured you'd be one
No,
of
I
those
didn't.
who would say this is
No.
bullshit. God. What? Oh, you mean like doing these Unicard tests were popular back then?
Yes, when I was
Okay.
1970.
I guess nowadays maybe they fell out of like the the popular mainstream way of doing psychic tests.
That's right. That's right. Nobody, I don't think anybody believes in ESP. You don't hear about it anymore, So, but when I was young, it was a thing.
Interesting. Okay, must have been an interesting time growing up when science fair projects or whatnot involved Unicards.
Yeah, today it's like, proving that global warming is, that we're all going to die from something, confirming global warming. Scientifically, so science is confirming that the Earth that climate change is, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What are the other things like power line, cancer from power lines, whatever. I saw my science fair project was how much sawdust can you put in Rice Krispies Puffs before anyone notices?
That sounds like it could win one of those Ig Nobel prizes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Anyway.
I hope nobody died eating that. I don't know.
The statute of limitations, there is no statute of limitations on that kind of.
Oh, really? So you were feeding people sawdust? Okay.
Yeah, so I hope nobody died either. Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, that's not quite the science experiment I was expecting you would have done, but it's certainly interesting.
Yeah.
But, all right, guys, we've gone a little over time, but considering that we did not do an episode for 2.5 weeks, it's okay. All right, with that, we can talk about aliens next time. This was already weird enough of a topic, so All right.
I think so. Yeah. By the way, Carl Jung also wrote about UFOs. So flying saucer.
I did not know that. Looks like Carl Jung investigated quite a lot of. Yeah, I'm gonna have to read up some more on it. So that's for sure. All right, everyone. Right. Okay. As I always say, go on, support the show, patreon.com/SG2 on space. Thank you again, Kyle Baker, Sam Welsh, John Graves, for your kindly donations. Subscribe, do all that wonderful stuff.
Tell your friends. Leave comments.
Comments are very welcome, for sure. Mm-hmm. So look up because you never know what you will see. Yeah. And see you all next week. So.
Namaste. And shalom.
Shalom.
And have a good and Shana Tova for Rosh Hashanah.
Yes. Anything more?
Umetuka. So